Hey YouTube, Joyboy here. So, chapter 154 of Boku no Hero Academia is out. So if you're not caught up to Boku no Hero, don't check out this video unless you plan on getting spoiled. And now that you have presumably left, let's begin. My god, this is so damn intense. Just like reading this is like, it hurts my heart. Literally, I feel like I'm about to have a heart attack. I have fully eaten my words a couple chapters ago when I thought that after Mirio lost his quirk, things would go relatively smoothly, because that is definitely not what has happened. There's just too much to talk about. But let's start off with Eraserhead. Guys, I honestly, I was shocked in the middle of this chapter. I had absolutely no idea that all of a sudden Eraserhead was gone. And I thought that maybe I missed something in the last chapter, but I really didn't. The only thing that really happened was that Eraserhead got slashed by the Minute Hand and couldn't stop himself from blinking. But from that point to this chapter, somewhere in the middle there, Chizaki completely removed him from this battle. I guess we have to assume that because his movements were slowed, Chizaki, using his ability to deconstruct and reconstruct things, like, moved him and essentially already captured him. Like, geez. And so this is what I feel like we need to ask about Eraserhead right now. Obviously, he got struck by Chronostasis' quirk, and that is super detrimental. But it just matters how long that this effect lasts. If it really just depends on Horikoshi and what he wants to do. It's very possible that Chizaki could end up leaving here with Eraserhead, and that could create some sort of dramatic plot point. I could definitely see that being the case. But it also seems pretty reasonable to me that eventually Chronostasis' quirk wears off and Eraserhead is actually able to defend himself. But I guess the reason that I don't fully buy into perhaps Eraserhead's dire situation is just because I felt like Horikoshi had to remove him from the fight in order to make it as dramatic as we got in this chapter. Eraserhead, with the ability to erase quirks, essentially removes a lot of Overhaul's things. And so it would just be probably a really boring fight, like sort of how I initially envisioned it if he was there. But now with him off-paneled, it's possible that he could return and act as a trump card to help defeat Overhaul. I still don't really believe in Overhaul's defeat in this situation, or at the very least save everyone from dying. But honestly, I don't see any definitive evidence which would point to any particular circumstance. At this point, it seems like the possibilities are pretty open as for what Eraserhead's story might be in the future. But I wish I had this same perspective on Sir Night-Eye. Man, guys, it's a tough situation for me to speculate on because I just don't know. But we saw what happened. He got impaled through his torso and seems to have severed his arm. At the very end of this chapter, we see his head lie against a rock. It is super hard to believe that Sir Night-Eye is going to survive this. The main problem that I have is keeping in with realistic outcomes. I just don't see how he can possibly be saved. The injury that he has is no doubt a fatal wound. Now, there are quirks that exist, such as Recovery Girl, who may be able to actually fix him or help him survive, but she's not here. Speaking purely realistic, and it's very possible that it's not going to be realistic, but purely realistically here, his fatal wound, he has only but a few minutes to live if he hasn't already died. And with no one present capable of healing injuries aside from Overhaul, who we should not suspect is going to fix him, I honestly have to believe that he is dead already or will die. But if you wanted my actual opinion on which of these two situations that I would prefer or that I believe in, it's that he's not dead yet, but he will die at the conclusion of this fight. And the reason that I say this is, for me, there feels as though one hanging plot that needs to be addressed. And I also saw Sunpatch make a video about this, and I want to, I guess, add in my perspective, sort of supporting what she said in her theory video, which is that I think that what Sir Night-Eye saw will become important. We have to find out what that was. And so this is essentially the theory, which is that Sir Night-Eye saw everyone die. That was what Shizaki's future told him. And so I really think that this explains everything that we saw in this chapter, which is that first we were explained that Sir Night-Eye doesn't want to look into people's futures because he thinks that perhaps looking into their future locks in that fate. Essentially, once you know that something will happen, it doesn't matter necessarily what happens in the middle, but that future is set in stone. so you cannot change the future. This sort of adds in with Sir Night-Eye's perspective on the imminent death of All Might, that he saw All Might die. And so even if he tells All Might that he's going to die, and everyone knows that All Might's going to die, and All Might hides in a bunker for 10 years in order to avoid his death, at some point in time, the vision that Sir Night-Eye saw would come to pass. And so from a narrative perspective, the emphasis on this suggests only negative things. If Sir Night-Eye saw the future and everyone ended up being saved and Chizaki was captured, right, then it wouldn't necessarily be important that that future was set in stone. That is what you want. But if the future that is set in stone is something that you don't want, such as everyone dying, then how awful would it be to see that and see it as being inevitable? And I think that this lines up with the panels that we were given. This is what happened. As if he were clinging on to something, Night-Eye looked into Chizaki's future. Amidst the scene of his likely defeat, he held on to a sliver of hope. He hoped for that the girl would be saved, the boys safe, Chizaki defeated and apprehended, to see that future. And then we see Sir Night-Eye, and then we see Black and his shocked face. We get a very clear contrast between what Sir hopes to see and what he actually sees. This cannot be a good thing that he saw. And then Horikoshi emphasizes at the end of the chapter. Chizaki says this: "You guys coming here has only made things worse for yourselves. You do recognize this, right? Give it up. It's just going to turn out exactly as I said it would. Everyone will die." Horikoshi is letting us know that the possibility of everyone dying is very real. And Deku says this: "I won't let that happen, even if that's what fate has decided. I will bend the future." Holy shit, guys, the goosebumps are real. So in this chapter, we have Sir Night-Eye talking about how the future that he sees as determined fate, it cannot be changed. Deku even emphasizes that perhaps it is fate that everyone will die, but it doesn't matter because he will change the unchangeable future. And so going back into why exactly, I don't think that Sir Night-Eye is dead yet. And of course, it's possible that maybe he ends up surviving, but I think that he needs to survive for a little bit longer. I think to cement the moment that I believe that this is trying to create. The realization, as set up almost initially when we first met Sir, that All Might had in fact chosen the correct successor for the powers of One for All. I truly believe that Sir needs to realize this if he dies before he dies. And I think in this way, Sir needs to realize that the futures that he sees aren't set in stone, and that Deku will change them and give him hope for the future of All Might. And so let's talk a little bit more about Sir's potential death. And this is another thing that I want to throw in here as well, which is, you know, I've read like 800 chapters of One Piece, so I have a good feeling about how death works in that series. But for Boku no Hero, I do not feel as strongly, because we're so early on in the chapters. So in this way, I really feel as though anything is possible. I've seen some people talk about how this is a shonen and that, you know, that the characters will survive. But I really don't think that Boku no Hero is being set up as that kind of story. I think that the stakes in Boku no Hero are real. But that's not to say that I expect Attack on Titan or Game of Thrones level deaths. I think that, honestly, my preference for how deaths work in stories is that they aren't common, but when they happen, they are extremely impactful, that the plot armor doesn't protect every character in the story. But just because I have this impression of Boku no Hero does not mean that it's currently being set up. We've gone through 150 chapters of Boku no Hero Academia, and who has died? No one. A bunch of people have lost their quirks, but survived. We have a bunch of heroes who have retired, but no one has died. Even All Might, who had the strongest death flags of anyone else, found a way to survive. I really think that this scene with Sir will almost define what my perspective will be for the future of this series, which is that if he ends up surviving, then we're looking at a story, in my opinion, which will always find a way to keep characters alive. But if Sir actually dies, this opens up the door to the cold sweats at night when we get to some of the heavy future chapters of Boku no Hero. So yeah, guys, this is honestly what I hope happens, because just reading this chapter and the circumstances around it, it creates so much more drama when you can actually believe a character could die. But yeah, I really feel like that's what I wanted to say after this chapter. Obviously, Deku coming in at the end is so incredibly hype, and I'm so glad that this is finally leading up to this moment that he will have that will be amazing. This is going to be one of those moments that I am going to look forward to it being animated because it's going to be so badass. If you really think that Sir saw everyone die, and you know that Deku's going to end up being the #1 hero, you know that he's going to survive, which means he's going to change the future, which means that he's about to do something so incredibly hype. I feel it. But yeah, guys, absolutely love the chapter. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you noticed anything from this chapter that I may have missed. Just share your thoughts. Like the video if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video. Make sure to check out links to Discord and Patreon in the description. Huge thanks to all of my Patreons. Subscribe if you haven't, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.